sponsored by the ICE organization. I want to, just a few quick introductions. I'm Tina. Hello, everybody. We want to make sure that everyone knows this is a ICE-sponsored webinar. So ICE members, you will be receiving a PDH from ICE at the conclusion of the webinar. Any attendees will receive that. That email will come from the ICE organization. You will also be receiving a complimentary 90-day subscription to the Who Knew It resource, and that email will come from your Who Knew It organization. That will actually come from me. I am Tina. Jamie is on camera as well. Hi, Jamie.
Hi, guys.
So what we're going to be doing to get things started, I want to just remind everyone, some of you have attended previous webinars and some of you, this is your first. So just a quick background on why we started doing the webinars. ICE used to have a partnership with the company Atomic Learning, which is our former name. And we really have evolved from a training company into a full-blown professional development and much more than PD. We are a district-wide resource that is really I guess I would call it a district community resource, because we provide access to everyone in the district, including employees of the district, students, and also parents as well. So what we're going to learn about today is a little bit different than what some of you knew as Atomic Learning and a training resource. Today we're talking about flipping your PLC. And we are going to be hosting quarterly webinars. This, I believe, is our third one. And in between each webinar, you'll have that 90-day access. So as an ICE member, if you attend all quarterly webinars, you then would have a year of a free subscription to the Who Knew It resource. And we'll be providing our contact information. We would love to see you as ambassadors of Who Knew It, and we are a platinum partner with ICE. So we're loving that, growing that professional network. And we'll be meeting you at the ICE conference coming up here next week. Jamie and I will be there along with some others, so we're really excited about that. And before we get into the webinar here, I want to make sure that we take a minute to allow Jamie to introduce herself. And I will be making sure that, I guess I forgot this, Jamie, make sure that you look down at the bottom of your screen. You should, if it's hidden, you can kind of hover your mouse over it and you'll see that you have a Q&A. You can open up a Q&A box. And we do encourage you to add some questions in there, and we will be taking time at the end of the webinar for some open Q&A. However, I will be monitoring our any questions that you have while Jamie is presenting. So please do add some questions. And with that, I just want to introduce Jamie. She is going to be providing your professional development for this afternoon. Jamie?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tina. I am excited. I got to be an attendee of the past webinars, and this is the first time that I have a chance to share, and I'm really excited to do that now and really talk about PLCs, my experience with PLCs, and some of the things that we all wish we saw in PLCs. And so from there, I'm just going to give you a little bit of background about what my expertise is and what my passions are and what I do here at Who Knew It. So I'm part of the marketing team, and I get a chance to work with the ambassador program, which is just amazing to work with incredible educators around the world. I also have a chance to do the blogging and the social media, the different accounts for the social media for the company. And I'm going on this year. This will be my second year with Who Knew It, but I've been in the classroom for 10 years prior, both going from a math teacher to math activities director to then moving into instructional technology. Actually, prior to that, an interventionist in math, and then moving over to instructional technology from the district level, and then now here with Who Knew It. So I've had a chance to just share under many different topics, provide a lot of professional development, and also work with educators on, what their interests, what their needs are. One of my love and passions are augmented and virtual reality, so immersive technology. So I spend quite a bit of my time researching. So during the day I work for Who Knew It, and at night I do immersive technology. So everything else under the sun in that area, I love sharing and meeting with people. But we are so excited next week to be at ICE. Tina and I will both be at the booth. And we're just going to do some really different stuff. So I'm really excited to have an opportunity to connect with some of you there. And I'm already seeing quite a few people here in our participants and our attendees. I can see those of you that have signed up and signed in, and I'm able to see, if there's questions going on. And even here at the end, should you want to, and you would like to ask a question and you'd like to be unmuted, I'd be happy to unmute you, and feel free to share maybe some insight onto what's happening at your district and things that you're doing. So we are really here to make this less of a very stringent webinar, but more of a conversation. So we definitely invite your comments and ideas and recommendations to just be a part of the conversation. So we're ready to get started. I'm going to start off by just telling you, we'll start off here, what is a PLC? So, when you think about what a PLC is intended to be and what it has turned into sometimes, I think it is a wonderful concept in itself to give extra time to educators. And I'll go ahead and just come here because we're going to go over some of this stuff. But to be able to provide on the campus a opportunity for educators to connect in a community. They refer to this as a professional learning community. This is generally done on campus. We talk about another type of community called a PLN, and that would be your network. So those are those people that you're connected to maybe outside of your campus. And I want to say 99% of my time I feel like I'm spending with my network. Those are people that have really just given me information to live by, things that I can take back into educators, things that I've learned from them, things that I can invest into them. So that investment both ways. And our communities look a little different because on our campuses, or maybe even district-wide, depending on the size of your district, having an opportunity to connect and engage and learn from others allows you to be outside of this silo of everything's on you. You are creating everything from scratch. You have nobody there to support you. And while probably most of us will say that's not the case, we have somebody, mentor, teacher that we connect with, or an educator that, is the same grade level or subject matter, we probably can say that's the case. But ultimately, when it comes down to it, we don't necessarily have the time to support one another or to get supported. So setting up the professional learning communities are really intended for educators to have the designated time that's for them, to invest into them so that they can be the best educator they can be, the success of their students, right? So some of the things that you'll see in a PLC is it is established typically by your district. It could be something that your principal has established or your coach has established. So depending on who is setting that up for you, that is something set in stone. It could vary. So your community could be different on Monday than it is on Tuesday than it is on Wednesday. So you have a variety of options that districts take, but they take this designated time and they may group you by subject. So I have seen this in past districts where that particular grade level gets together every Tuesday. And every Tuesday, they're talking about grade level specific stuff. So activities happening, benchmarks that are going on, things that are happening, maybe what to be careful for, district-wide announcements, things of that sort. Then they can also group you up in your grade level. And having your grade level specific, that's something that's saying, okay, well, subject level, that could say, okay, well, I teach math. So all the math educators, whether that's, a different grade level from me, maybe it is the same grade level, but I can collaborate with them. We can talk about, what has been going on, what we're noticing students are struggling with, what concepts are coming up, what options do we have, what manipulatives do we need to bring to the table. And so having the opportunity to be able to collaborate in our communities within subject is very beneficial and necessary. We also have experience level. So you might have a PLC that you've been assigned because you're a first-year teacher or first couple-year teacher. Sometimes they say the first 5 years, we're going to have you grouped up in a group where you're going to get this intensive support and guidance, and we're really going to step in and make sure your years of success are wonderful. So having maybe a mentor teacher that comes in and is participating with you in that PLC is often seen as well. So this could be met during school or after school. And I've seen it both ways. I think there's pros and cons on both sides, because one is you're missing instructional time opportunities with that individual teacher at that moment. So while that is beneficial to a district because they don't lose instructional time with their teachers, then they get a chance to not hire as many teachers. So they say, okay, we're going to push our PLC time to this designated time. It's almost like an after-school meeting. And then in addition to that, you might also have it during school. So it could be both. It could be varied depending on your district. But having it during your school day makes it really great because you get a chance to really focus and hone in on what you need to accomplish. Whereas after school, I think it's a lot easier to get the tasks done that you need to get done. You're trying to get kids out. There's a lot of other things kind of pulling at you at that moment. Whereas during the school day, it's a lot easier to have that focus. But many times we don't have the voice to say, this is what we would like to see, but instead it's given to us. So, hey, Jamie, you are given 1 day a week. This is your PLC, 1 day a month, 1 day, every day at this time. This is your PLC time. So depending on how your district has provided that opportunity for you, you go with that. And so within those daily ones, I think that there's, different things that you might cover on a daily basis than you would on a monthly basis. I think you're going to cover a lot more intensive on the daily because you have an opportunity to cover every little detail, as opposed to the monthly, you're kind of covering a broader topic and covering what is required right now, what is something we have to talk through. The rotations could be really done by topics. So you can have the team meetings that you're having. Maybe it's a team that you're designated with that is part of your core group, right? So you might have students that kind of work within your group, and those are the kids that you all see together, even though you're on a different subject, but same grade level. You can have leadership PLC, so it might be your leadership team that regularly meets and prepares for the educators and helps get the things together for upcoming benchmarks or exams. It could be on topics. So it might be this person really needs to have a focus in on this. And this is what we're seeing as a growth area for this teacher. Let's focus in on these topics. So Monday, like I said before, Monday, you might have something that's specific. Like for me, when I taught instructional technology, when I was working with the teachers, their PLC was designated to a specific day on that campus for me. So I would come and we'd do our PLCs together. So that training would be there. The opportunity for me to float around into their classrooms would be there. So being there on that day allowed me to really invest into them pretty well. But it was once a week. So, when you have these things that you're covering, you probably have a lot more to cover, and it was easier to put different topics inside of different days and effectively cover everything you need to cover, instead of just saying every day we're meeting in this grade level and let's see what happens. I think it's a lot harder to be purposeful with your time. So moving over, what we're going to do is look and see kind of a rate of your PLC. So I have a couple questions out there that we're going to look at before we jump in there. And I'm going to start those questions, and you're going to participate and let us know where you're at. So with this Q&A, let me go ahead and pull up the poll. And I'm going to launch this poll here for you. You should see this where you can answer these questions. So as you're looking at this, the first one is, my PLCs are highly successful, and you can go in and answer that. We take risks, we try new techniques. We all of our voices matter. So I kind of went through to give you a little bit of a clue as to some of the topics that we're going to talk about. And I'm already seeing some input coming in, which is great. And as you're going through this, I'm seeing kind of where the group stands, and look and see what areas are the most needed and what areas are the greatest struggle. So as you're finishing that and looking through those poll questions, there's only 4. And if you're wondering, some of you are putting on there, not applicable. I did put that on there because it may be that at the moment you don't have PLCs. This is not something your district's participating in. And maybe this is a topic that you have changed and adapted to meet the needs of your district. So even if that's not something that you're doing, I think we can all relate to even meetings, like purposeful meetings. And that hopefully will allow you to get involved with both the content that we're covering right now, as well as really the leadership, even for our students, being purposeful in the way that we deliver instruction. Is something that as educators we look for as well in meetings when we have meetings together as educators. So that purposeful time together. All right. So as I'm seeing, it looks like it is coming towards an end. If you're still in there answering, I'm seeing quite a bit of answers. Not everybody has answered, it doesn't look like. But we have a few more people. So if you have not had a chance to go in there and respond, feel free to do so now. This will help us to get a better idea of where you're at. All right, and I'm just going to kind of go through this unless something drastic comes through and people respond and it's a lot different than what we have right now. I'm going to just share with you kind of where the group is. So my PLCs are highly successful, and by far 67% said sometimes. So that's a good thing. I think I gave you kind of like yes, no, sometimes, so giving you a chance to kind of say, I wouldn't ever say no, because sometimes it is successful, right? I don't know if I would say highly successful. So there could be a way that you read that and say, this is, I probably not. No, we're not really highly successful, but we've had some success. Maybe some of you say, you know what, our PLCs are rocking and rolling. I've learned so much. I've grown so much because of them, and I'm so thankful for them. All right, great. So we take risks to try new techniques to improve the success of our students. And we have a few of us. So that's an interesting thing. I would say 53% of you said a few of us, 33% said yes. And so looking at that is an interesting, I didn't anticipate that. I didn't anticipate that we would get more so on that end. And we actually have none of the group saying no. I think that's fantastic, because PLCs typically become more about answering questions and solving this problem, but not necessarily on, this is a new skill you need to have. We're going to try this out because last week was a bomb. Let's try this. This is what I learned here at this conference, and let's bring this back. So I think that's awesome to see how many people actually feel very confident about trying new techniques and strategies and taking that risk. Number 3, all voices matter in my PLC. So we had 40% that said at times, so that was our dominating group there. But then really close behind is completely agree. And only 2 people, 13% of our group here, had said conversation is usually overshadowed by certain individuals, right? So that, that happens at every meeting. We have those folks in our teams that are really excited and enthusiastic and maybe become a little bit overboard, or we really don't feel confident to be able to speak our voice because maybe PLCs have certain administrators coming through and what's being said is being critiqued, and people don't feel the freedom to really discuss where they're at or ask questions freely. So to see, really majority of our group is saying, yeah, I do agree. I completely agree with that. And at times, our voices do matter. And then the last question was, my administrator provides support and encouragement to my PLC. And that says sometimes. So 60% of our group said sometimes that is the case. And then, 13% said at time, all the time. So that's fantastic. Those that are just up there, I'd love to hear some of the things that are happening on your campus and your district. I would love to hear the success of the PLCs, especially towards the end. I'd love your feedback. And then also we have some that said on the opposite extent. So those that said yes, we also had rarely. We didn't have anybody say never. So I opened that door up a little bit more just because I understand that there's going to be a lot in between when it comes to administrator support. It really depends. And you probably have been to places more than just one school district. And if that's the case, you've had different experiences at different places. And as you're going through your PLCs, it might be a chance for you to evaluate, like, that school was amazing. This school struggled. This administrator was never there. That administrator was very active in what we were doing. So being able to, and I'll just go ahead and end this, but being able to look at that and evaluate that and see how active and how successful your PLCs are really from your administrator is important. So I'm going to go ahead and just share that result with you so that you can see what that looks like. So looking through those results, I think it's great to see how many people felt very positive about their PLCs, which is enlightening, because I think having a chance to really talk and collaborate from a positive stance and only making it better is a really good thing. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing now and get started on our next slide here. All right. Okay, so let's think about our PLC planning. So before you ever get started with your PLC, some of the things that you want to basically just say, all right, we are going to start PLCs next year. But, before we get started, here's some things that we need to make sure that we establish when this first begins. Because if you're going into it and providing the time, but not really providing what the expectations are, then you're really not going to gain success in that area. You're just providing an extra time off for the teacher, right? So having the established expectations right there, I'll start there, is very important, because it's going to give your educators a chance to go in and say, this is, what we need to accomplish today. There's specific agenda. There might be content that we need to cover. There might be certain questions that we need to have answered, maybe in forms filled out. So there's going to be these expectations that are there and set, and that's good for all of us. It helps us stay online. But I'm going to go ahead and really take a turn on the norms. And I think with the norms and expectations, and when we're looking at PLC planning, thinking about this from a perspective of community. So if we're talking about a community, is it one person that's telling the community to do something, and then the community is all just responding to that command? And I would say no. When we think about community, it is something that as the whole group is committed to those expectations. So they're going to come together, and I think it's very important to establish those norms and expectations as a community. And that may look different to different communities. So you may go to your subject level and then go over to your grade level and have maybe a little bit different as far as the expectations go. But I think that is something that has to be done by the community. There has to be buy-in from the educators, from the community. If there's not, then you essentially feel belittled. You feel that that is something that you have to do instead of something that you want to do. And you're certainly not going to get teachers that want to abide by something like that. So you're going to get a lot more resistance to having your educators participate the way that they want to participate and the way that they want to interact. So depending on those norms is something that you establish as a community. And once you get a buy-in from everybody in the community, then everybody wants to follow through with that. Now, I think I did put in here visited as necessary. So it could be that you come back to those norms. Maybe it's posted in the room where you meet. So if that's something that you consistently go back and reference back to, that's important for the community to continue to grow. And it's normal. It's normal to kind of get off, and it was, spring break, and here we go again. And I just want to talk about that amazing vacation we went on, or, oh, wow, it wasn't snowing. And so, there's these things that you may want to get off on a tangent on, but really kind of coming back to those expectations that, yes, we as a community say those first 5 minutes are for us to just talk, just connect, and just get things off of our chest. So we want to be aware that everybody has an opportunity to speak. So it's short and sweet, right? Like, get to the point. Or maybe that's not part of it. Maybe, hey, our time for talking is really after school because we are so limited to what we need to accomplish in this amount of time that we've been given. So really establishing those norms and expectations, because you're going to have those few that want to come in and they're going to want to talk about things that are off topic. They're going to want to talk about, did you see that this person in my class, he was acting out of control, she wouldn't stop talking. And, that's so easy for PLCs to turn into that and not be productive. So really establishing those norms and expectations, I can't emphasize enough, getting the whole group to buy in, letting them establish those norms. And then we have, like listening. All right, so what's the expectation? Are we going to have everybody's voices in this? Is this going to be something that we are just going to listen to a meeting for? Or is it something that, also can I trust that what is said in this group is something that I can trust that they're not going to take that and twist my words and tell somebody else? So, really having a community of people that build on trust and really establishing the fact that you're going to respect the voice of that person by listening to them. You're going to respect the voice of that person by validating them. You're going to respect the voice of that person by not being the one that speaks all the time. So really getting that listening skill done for everybody in the group, really actively giving attention to those that are talking. Also, we talked a little bit about this, all voices matter. Absolutely. So giving everybody a chance, even if they're not maybe always the vocal one, but making sure to acknowledge them and ask them to actively participate, that their voice matters. Looking at time. So this is a biggie because there's teachers that are like to the very second, like they want to know every little last detail. So we're going to designate 5 times for this, 5 minutes for this, 5 minutes for this. We're going to have this 3 minutes. So they're like just very tight on their time schedule. And then you have teachers that are like never show up to class on time, never show up to work on time, that are always really relaxed. And I think that's where you got to establish those norms as to the expectation of the group. So if you're coming in late all the time, that's something that we all hold each other accountable for. So looking at confidentiality, we talked a little bit about that's something that we as a whole community know that this is us that are trying to be the best that we can be for our students. So what's being said here isn't something that you can go and ruin that trust with somebody in your community as well. Accountability. So having the accountability by your group and just making sure that, like we talked about with time, with voices, that if you see somebody really disrespecting another person in the group, like holding that person accountable and, letting them know, hey, look, let's go back to our norms. We're going to treat each other with respect by doing this, that, and the other. Also leadership involved. So we can say, what people are going to be coming in and being a part of these PLCs. So it could be that you have your administrator that's designated to be with you on those days, and they should be part of that too. They should be part of the conversation. But as a PLC, it's not that administrator takes the lead and speaks the whole time, but instead is part of that community, inviting everyone to have a voice as well. And then roles of each individual. So when you are in the process of your planning and you're looking at each individual being actively involved in the PLC, it might be a good idea to establish who is somebody that always does the notes. If you want to have that alternate, then establish that and say, Tina, you're always going to be the one that's taking the notes for us. So she takes it maybe, it's a place that we can all access, and we'll talk a little bit about that too. And then when Tina's not there, I'll take the lead and I'll take over on the notes. And so setting the agenda, both for that current meeting as well as future meetings. Oftentimes in PLCs, you're expected to have some sort of notes, something that you're going to go back and bring back to your administrator about what you accomplished. And so having those things typed up and having the agenda ready for the next meeting and to make sure to cover certain things at the next meeting is really important. So it might be that person that's writing some future things that need to be done for the next agenda. So as you go through providing the room. So this is something that you would think would be super small, like we'll just, we'll rotate. But that gets really confusing, and oftentimes teachers have a hard time finding where that's at. And then it becomes a norm that everybody's 10 minutes late because they were looking to see which room they were in. So making sure that there's, I would highly recommend having a place that's consistent, that's communicated regularly. And then that room is also a place that you want to keep, you want to have it well kept. You want to leave that place the best that you can. And unfortunately, as educators, we all know that our students can totally thrash our classroom within minutes, but educators do it too. And it's really sad to think that they can't respect your space. So keeping that in mind as a whole group, I think is, something just to a respect of your community. And then, of course, watching the time, just making sure you're giving adequate amount of time for people to get back to their classrooms and prep for that next class. So when you're looking at all of these things, keeping in mind that these roles may fluctuate, they may remain the same, and people may hate their role. So you need to evaluate that and say, okay, well, if you hate it, we all hate that. So let's have that rotating. But really just allowing everybody to have a voice and a part of making sure that there's success in the PLC. And then considering allowed time. So kind of already touched on that for watching the time. So when you are making these plans, you might want to separate some of the topics that you cover, but it may be like we talked about, that 5 minutes of just, let's just talk to connect, because maybe I feel that that's a time that we all need to have in order to move to the next step of really actively into our PLC, because we can't handle just seeing each other, not talking about that. So maybe you allow that time. Or you might want to say, I need to consider at the end that there's a lot of questions because we have a ton of new teachers. So keeping in mind that you really need to have that agenda scheduled, and it might be that it's continuously being modified and perfected throughout the year. So you're gathering the input from what you're getting, but you're consistently going back and really valuing their time and giving them the opportunity to maximize the benefit of the meeting. And then discuss how to measure success in meetings and professional. And it's so funny because I have a bunch of windows over here, so I'm not seeing everything under here. I just want to make sure I'm reading the right word. Okay, growth. There we go. Okay, so I have windows on my side of my screen that you're not seeing, but looking at how to measure success. And that is a tricky one, because what is measured as success for your PLC might be very different for the next day in a different PLC. So looking at the success of your team is something that you're going to want to, establish with your administrator. What does success look like? What exactly are you wanting to get, for us to get out of this? But then 2, it might be that you have an administrator that doesn't know how to help you be successful, or their expectation is not set at an area that you feel like as a community can really benefit from. So it might be that you've established inside of your expectations and norms to say, you know what, we're going to actually go above and beyond, because our success means that our students have built a solid relationship with us, and they're coming to us to have real conversations, and they feel safe in my class. Or I have students that have never been able to be successful on their standardized test, and they showed success. So that might be an expectation to say, in this particular community, our success is. And having that measured, I think, helps you find value, and it helps you continuously strive towards something inside of your meetings. And so it might be that your success looks different at the beginning of the year than it does at the end of the year, so you can consistently modify that. It might be that every meeting has a different success. So establishing that right off the agenda, today's success is. And so really looking at that and saying, this is where we want to be as professionals, and this is where we should be by the end of the year, by the end of the month, by the end of the agenda, right? So as you're going through, you're having a chance to be able to really strive for something that's going to be meaningful, both for you as a professional as well as your students. And then we have creating a cloud folder is this next thing that I have listed here. And this really is looking at it from, can you print this out and handwrite it? Absolutely. Can this be something that you go back to and have it in a Word document, but nobody else has access to it? Absolutely. Is that where you're going to receive the most benefit for your community? Maybe not. Maybe it's going to take more time to go out and make copies of what you hand wrote down. Maybe that's where you feel most comfortable and you're the note taker, and that's how you're going to give out those notes. And maybe you have a folder that you all have access to and you can reference back to regularly. And so there might be different ways that you're doing that. Maybe you handwrite it and somebody else takes a snapshot picture of it and then circulates that in the group. So depending on what you're looking for, though, I think oftentimes having it stored where others can access it and have it regularly is very beneficial. I had a boss at one point that every meeting that we had was in a Google Doc, and the Google Doc was just continuous for the whole year. So we had dates, and then we had all of our notes underneath. So anytime we wanted to reference back to what happened the week before in our meeting, we can go back inside that same Google Doc and just scroll through and see it. And then as people were inside of the meeting, all of us were taking notes. So it wasn't just heavy, hey, Robin, you're the one that's in charge of doing all the notes. Instead, it was, no, all of us can add input. All of us that are speaking up and participating in this meeting have a chance to go in and hyperlink this, or have the document, tagged here, or whatever else you need to have access to as a community. You can go in there and have it available, and it actively involves everyone to be a part of that. You might even have questions and resources that you want to tie in. And I think questions is a good one, because maybe at the beginning of your agenda, you might say, here's some key questions that we need to address. Like, we're noticing this is a problem. Let's talk about this. So those questions could be posted, and maybe all the responses underneath. So it's something that I can reference back to and say, hey, I remember when we were really worried about this area, and I'm trying to figure out how to solve this still. Let me go back and look at those notes. So it gives you a good frame of reference to reference back to. And it's really easy to do searches inside of cloud documents where you're looking for particular words, as opposed to looking for words in a bunch of files that you have in a folder. So that, I think, makes it much easier for you to track your success for the whole year. It makes it much easier to communicate what is happening to administrators that aren't in the meeting, and those individuals that aren't able to make it. Maybe they're out that day and they need to reference back to those things that are being covered. And then we're also looking at targeting a topic of professional growth. And so looking at all of these areas, as a professional, we are active and during the day. But what happens outside of that day, of school day? I mean, many of us would go home and we would grade assignments. We would follow up on things that we didn't get to accomplish during the school day. I mean, realistically, there's just not enough hours to accomplish what you need to accomplish for student success. And ultimately, if you're trying to do what's best for your students, you're often frustrated because it's impossible to do everything. It's just impossible. So oftentimes we go home and we're spending time gathering what we need to do to be successful for the next day or for the next week, or whatever that might be. But we often don't spend time on our own professional growth. And I think that's where Who Knew It really ties in. And we're going to talk through some of the very valid ways of really gaining the maximum benefit of your PLCs. But one of the things that really should be highlighted in every PLC is opportunity for growth, both during the day as well as outside of the school day. Just getting either people aware of maybe conferences coming up, or maybe in our case, modules that have been released that directly tie in. And here at the end of the this particular webinar, I've listed several different Who Knew It, both modules and pathways, where you can go back through and have the opportunity for growth and leadership skills and student skills that are necessary for them. And so everything under the sun that is going to help you grow professionally. All right. So looking at the actual meeting is looking at some of these questions. So, as you're going through and saying, when we're actually meeting, what do we want our students to learn? So if this is something that I am, as Jamie, need to grow in professionally, as a community we need to grow in, ultimately, what is something that our students are going to benefit from us learning these things, right? So what do we want them to gain out of what we're doing here in this community? How will we know what they've learned? And so that's a question we often have. I mean, Unfortunately, we all know assessments. We know it all too well, so well that it's become so extreme. And, many of us are really burnt out by assessment. So you hear that word and you're like, oh my gosh, but are there other ways that we can know how they learned? Is this going to be shown in something that we can go back and evaluate to make sure that the benefit of our PLC is really going out and affecting our students? How will we respond when a student already knows it? So these are great questions. Oftentimes, I remember my first PLC, my first year teaching, I had a student that came in, I don't know, it was mid-year, maybe October, and he came into the classroom, and I was a 6th grade math teacher, first year teaching, and I had no new students until then. And I just remember thinking, what am I going to do with this kid? He's so behind. Like, look at how much we've covered and he hasn't been here. So I went to one of my mentor teachers, and as we were all meeting, I was saying, what are they thinking putting a new student in my class? Like, what am I supposed to do with this kid? And they all chuckled because that's the norm. And they just looked at me and said, what are you talking? You teach them, you help them build the bridge between what they were at and where they need to be. And it was just kind of like, whoa, those are the things that maybe you don't think about when you're going into the teaching profession, that somebody's depending on me to actually, help bridge the gap for these students that aren't exactly where you expect them to be. And it was just helping them, guide them. But, those kinds of questions, especially your newer teachers that will ask, these kids are really getting it. What are we going to do as an option for those kids that have just picked it up and they got it? What are we going to do for an option for the kids that are just not getting it? So as a community, you have a chance to really invest into someone else, and somebody invest into you to come up with ideas. Ooh, guess what I found? This is what we tried and this is what we did. And so being able to have those types of conversations to support all the many different obstacles that you'll face as an educator is really important. How will blended learning and technology use, what will that look like? So in my classroom, am I going to see, students on their computers typing out a document? Am I going to see my students actively engaged by putting together, I was going to say a scavenger hunt because I said that yesterday and I thought that would be so fun for our kids to actually write out. We're talking about literacy and giving our students a chance to just go out and create things in a very unconventional way, because the way that we think of literacy is sit down, start writing, start reading, right? And so you're just like, okay, bam, 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 and you're just consistently just overwhelming them with just that one way, whereas that's not necessarily the way that is beneficial for a student all the time. And so coming up with a variety of ways of getting our students learning. So looking at that, like blended learning, is that something that we're going to provide another way for them to learn outside of just the face-to-face, outside of just sitting here in lecture or sitting here in a group and working in a group? So how am I going to provide this technology for my students that's really going to help them, like we talked about, bridge those gaps and understand learning that they couldn't do outside of that technology? And so is this something that we're going to use every day? What's the expectation of the district? What are my expectations? What tools do I have access to? So all of those kinds of conversations. I spend a lot more time on that end as an instructional technologist in the district, answering those questions like, when are we going to get this tech? When can we have access to this? Hey, do you know if this exists? Hey, I'm trying to bridge this. Tell me what I can do here. And so those types of conversations were very regular. And the expectations of how often that technology was done varied greatly by your administrator. So having those types of meaningful conversations with the others in the group. What are the group and individual needs for success? And so when you're looking at maybe your whole class or you're looking at your PLC group, we're looking at, what is the need for us to check off? Yes, this meeting was successful. Yes, this community is successful. Or yes, this classroom is getting it. Or even just individuals. So we're looking more at that personalized learning, right? So me as a professional going in and what I'm getting out of this PLC and what she's getting is very different. And so how do I make sure that everybody in our PLC is getting everything, as well as how does this look in my classroom? Because I know she is able to understand it by, manipulating something, and that student's able to do it by reading it, and that student's able to do it by hearing it, and that student's able to do it by typing it. So you have all these different levels of the way that they're learning, and something that you have to bridge for every single student as well as every single educator in your PLC. Those are also great opportunities to hear the success of other classrooms and what have they found. And it's also an opportunity that if everybody's finding that they're all hitting the same wall, then you have an opportunity to say, administrator, we'd love your input on this. We're all finding that this is a struggle. How can you help support us in this community to make sure that we're successful? And then we're also looking at additional resources like lesson plans, manipulatives, what technology we need, and access and training, right? So where do I get training for, how to use immersive technology? Because that lady just talked about augmented and virtual reality, and I have no idea what she's talking about. She's speaking Greek. And so, or, oh, I'd love to hear more, or, oh, I'm an expert at that. I didn't realize that there was content out there like that. So those types of things that are available to you, in that community, that you're having the access to more information. And those things are maybe some guiding questions that you can take into your group to make sure that you are essentially moving forward, both for you professionally as well as your classroom. We talked a little bit about setting up that agenda for that next meeting. And so getting prepared for what you're going to be doing and making sure that you have a chance to really go in and understand where the individual needs are. So if Jamie's really struggling in this area, and this meeting really, we thought we were going to be here, but we weren't. So we really need to make sure that we schedule some really great amount of time for her to ask questions, for us to help mentor her, for maybe to even bring in an outside expert into our PLC and have them kind of help support her. And so those types of things that you're designating that time, maybe we're designating time to research. Maybe this is time for us to say, this is what our needs are, but I don't have time to plan all this outside of class and outside of our PLC time. So maybe there's some designated time that is really prepping for the next meeting. Okay, guys, before we leave, let's get this down for our next agenda. And so you can include individual tasks. So I can say, all right, Tina, don't forget, this week you forgot to remind us about our 5 minutes of catching up, and we consistently talked about it throughout the whole meeting. We never moved past it. And so, Tina, make sure next time you tell us this first 5 minutes are designated for this, and then we move into everything else on our agenda. And it might be that, you have an individual task for different people in the community that, that sometimes this week you're going to be heavy on that person, and next week will be heavy on another person. So looking at those individual tasks that need to be completed, both, from the time the meeting's done to the next meeting. It also could be, hey guys, I'm going to go ahead and put it out there that we're going to be looking at this module on Who Knew It. It's going to be up to you to go through this. And then when we get back together, we're going to go through what we learned. So this is kind of your time to go and get your learning and your growth. And then we're going to come back as a group and kind of talk about and collaborate on how this could be practical for our classroom. And then what we hope to accomplish, what are our goals? That's pretty standard. Our action plan, what are we going to do? We're like, great, we sat here and talked. Now what? What actions taking place from our conversation? So I think that's unfortunate, but true, that we do a lot of talking, but not a lot of action, right? And it's sad because we need action. We need to put those things in action. Sometimes we don't feel like we can because we may not feel prepped or we may not feel prepared to do that. So really making sure that what you are putting out there for your goals and accomplishments, to make sure that that also includes that this is what we should be doing because of that. Observing our peers in our classroom. So I think that's a really great way of learning from others. Even if it's not something that I that I necessarily teach the same subject or the same grade level, but maybe even just watching classroom management style, maybe just watching how that student that's really having a hard time in my class, how they're excelling in that other class and why are they excelling? How can I implement those same kinds of things into my classroom? And so as you're going through, and that peer observation is really soaring right now. People are really recognizing the benefit of learning from other peers. And, I think that can also be said for our students, that if we went in and we said, that it wasn't a competition, but it was collaboration and it was something that you're going to learn something from somebody else. I think establishing those norms inside of your PLC are equally beneficial because you're learning that, wait, I may feel like I'm a lot more successful than that person, but boy, I'm nowhere close to that person. Maybe it's not about success at all, but the things that you can learn from them that they are finding success in, that you can go back and you can either help support them. It could be something that you are gaining and benefiting from as well. And then we have gather student data. So this is something that I think I remember doing by hand, especially when I was an interventionist. That was a struggle trying to talk about data about our kids because there was so much that was done for our, that I would just sit there and take all this stuff down and I'd handwrite it all out. And then I never graphed it because at the time I just never plugged that data into the computer. But it was more so like just evaluating like, oh, they're really struggling in this area right here. But they really got it here. So what happened between then and then? And I never really had the support from the student data other than how are they performing in other classrooms? How have they done on past benchmarks? How have they done on the standardized test? And I just didn't think that really gave me a full picture of the students. So I tried to do things outside of that by putting my own notes and engagement that I had with them and maybe even my own activities that I was evaluating. So student data, though, is really important in your PLCs because that's where you're going to come back and say, where are our kids struggling? Where are our kids just nailing it? What have we done right this year? What have we done wrong this year, right? Just being very honest in your community and saying, where do we need to move forward? Okay, yeah, they did all right last year. Yeah, they did okay this year. But what can we do to really make sure that they hit it home? And so giving it an opportunity for really evaluating what areas need to be worked on, even our trends and where our weaknesses are. As individuals, as a community, as a grade level, as a subject level, where's our weaknesses and where's our strengths? And then also coming back to reteaching and really going back and gathering that data and saying, this didn't work. I stunk. I don't know. It worked last year with those kids. This year, I failed miserably. So I need to switch things up. So getting together and really coming up with what ideas can I bring to the table to make sure that that doesn't happen again, or that we have some new ways of introducing that lesson that might really hit home for our students. That takes some little bit of research. All right. Okay, so I have another poll for you, and this one's a little bit shorter. It's just 3 questions. But your PLC strengths and weaknesses. And as I'm going through, I'm just going to go ahead and send that out to you. I'm going to launch that. So you're able to go in and answer some of these questions, such as what are your PLC strengths? So is it, prior to the meeting that you guys did a really great job at planning, really getting a great start. So at the beginning of the year, our PLC was golden. We are great at that. Or accomplishing goals, we do not do that very well. Like we put it out there and this is what we want to accomplish, but we're really shooting for the stars because we really struggle with hitting those success. It could be that it's like, we are really good at making sure that the next week we got everything ready. So, what are your community strengths? And then also, what are your weaknesses? So the same thing, are you struggling to make sure that your PLCs are prepared for the next week? Did you struggle at the beginning of the year where nobody really gave you any expectations, but mid-year you guys figured it out and started working forward? And then the last question, if I had to rate my PLCs from 1 to 5, and 5 being the best, I'd rate it as, and then nobody gave a 5, and that's okay. And that is, I feel like, you know, that's a normal. I don't think any of us can say it's one extreme or the other. And then none of us said it was a total waste of time, which is a good news, because if you start telling your administrator that your PLCs are a waste of time, chances are very likely you're going to lose your PLC time. So I would not make that recommendation to anyone. And I'm just going to go ahead and end this. And as I end this poll, I want to show you what that looks like and how different I think this one looks than the other one. I feel like we had kind of a dominating answer, whereas this one's a little bit more evenly spread as far as where people are at and the needs that they have for their PLCs, which I think is something that we should all consider in our PLCs, that you're going to have a variety of things that are happening in each community, and you're consistently working towards, you know, the growth of the whole group. So, okay. It was interesting. At the last question, we had a 2, a 3, and a 4. So it was pretty much like there was no final winner on that one. Those are all pretty evenly spread there. And so looking to see, you know, where that is, that's interesting that you know, we have a variety of groups out there. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and just tell you that this next part here, because I know we're getting close to ending here in a few minutes, and I just want to give you a chance to work. But this stuff here that I have listed, we have 6 steps and just getting your PLC started for success. And this is really flipping your PLC, because some of the things in here maybe we just talked about, and some of the things maybe you wouldn't typically hear about a PLC. So setting your clear expectations. We talked pretty thoroughly about that, and just making sure that everybody's on board. Getting input from everybody. If that has not been emphasized enough, I apologize, but it is. It's the most important part, is really giving everybody a chance to feel that their voice matters, and establishing that trust in the community. Setting actionable goals, like really definitely having a plan of action, yes, but then following through and doing something about what you just learned. And then also having that broader dialogue. And this is where I feel like it's going to be a little different, because my view of PLCs should never be so minimized that we're just in this small little community. I really am a firm believer in building a PLN and really going out there and broadening what you know, what you bring to the table by learning from people around the world. So I'm a heavy social media user, and that is something that has changed my world completely as a professional. And I actually have an article out there with ISTE called Twitter is Dumb, because I told my boss that nobody's on Twitter and Twitter's dumb. And I had to eat my words, because now I'm like just addicted. But I will tell you that in light of that, my viewpoint, because I hadn't tried, and I don't know, I just made this assumption, but really going out there and making those connections in the community is very, very important. All right, and the 5th thing is trackable pre-work. So really looking at what we talked about, like, hey, we're going to go into this module as a community. We're going to go in there and we're going to look at some of these things, these short little videos. We're going to go in and do it activity. We're going to learn it. We're going to do it. We're going to share it, and we're going to prove it. So as we come back, we have something that we can bring back to the table and talk about, not because we're getting critiqued, but because we want to grow, and we feel like being vulnerable and sharing our results is something that's going to help us grow as individuals as well as a community. So having those trackable points are great. And then also a culture of growth and accountability. And you know, forcing somebody to get together and talk about things is never going to be a success. But people actually wanting to be part of it, and people feeling comfortable in their group and actually feeling valued into their voice, that's a community that's going to be growth. That's a community that's going to hold each other accountable, because they know what's best for one another and they feel safe. And so those types of things are all listed inside of this white paper. Called An Educator's Guide to Flipping Your PLC. It was done through an interview with myself on PLCs, and we really went through what that looks like in a district, and how to successfully implement your PLCs to get the best benefit out of it. And I'm going to go ahead and let Tina just quickly go through this and then give you a chance. And I didn't see any questions come through, but feel free to put those in right now, and I will be happy to answer that. But Tina, if you want to hop on and just go through some of those resources, then I think we're ready to go through that. All right. And Hey, are you ready? Do you want to go ahead and go through some of these things here, Tina?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry about that, guys. I was trying to unmute for you. Some of these resources here, we will be emailing these resources out to you, but this is just a good example. Jamie mentioned a few times how Who Knew It would tie into, today's topic happened to be flipping your PLC, which also ties into effective PLCs, but there are so many other things when you're looking at targeting a topic. I'll start at the beginning here. One, we're recording this. Two, the sample agenda is going to be, I put that in the chat box for you guys. I put a link over there. We will be emailing it as well, but it's a very helpful handout, if you will. And also, again, the 90-day subscription, but I'm looking at the pathways here. Jamie went ahead and listed quite a few pathways that we offer. Keep in mind, Who Knew It is a vast library of different resources, from teaching strategies to technology training and student resources. So what she did here was went ahead and aligned some things that might be great topics for a PLC, which is wonderful. And I was going to share my screen here, but because we're short on time, I think we can skip that part of it. What I would encourage you to do, contact me. My information is on here, and then Jamie will be sharing there's some more contact information for you. So we're going to be sending out that list of resources, and with your access to Who Knew It, you are going to be able to log in and access all of those different learning resources. Beyond that, you can actually, it also is intended to be an on-demand learning resource. So oftentimes when we're doing the Sage on the Stage sit and get information, it could be as many as 60% of, you don't want to admit that, but it can be that you have up to 60% of your staff sitting there checking their phones, grading papers, and because sometimes the information is A, not pertinent to them, or B, they've already successfully gained that knowledge. And so we want to help with Who Knew It. You're able to personalize it. So make playlists, so to speak, and really aim your training at the strategies and goals of your district. So, Jamie, I can't thank you enough. I know Amber Hefner is on as well. And Amber, thank you for joining. I know you're not, we can unmute. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to put either in the chat box or answer in the Q&A section, excuse me. Maybe I need a little more coffee today.
We're going to be at ICE next week, so come by.
We're going to be at ICE. We've got a nice setup where we can have just some very nice open conversations and fun activities. Please stop by because we've got some great activities. Just a fun thing, and we'd really love to meet everyone in person. So we're going to be right by, I think Cross from Microsoft, and awesome. I know Amber is going to stop by and say hi for sure. And we also have a couple of sessions there. So I, for one, would absolutely love to meet you and just have a conversation. I want to learn from you, and that's really our goal. I think Jamie would agree. We can't do what we do without learning from our community and our universe of educators. That's why we do what we do. So anybody have any last minute questions? And you will be getting our information.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Casey, thank you so much for asking that. Yeah. The slideshow will be in the presentation. So this is being recorded. I'd be happy to share that over. I could share that. Tina already actually has access. So if you want to get in touch with Tina, it's listed here. Feel free to get in touch with her and she can send that over to you. And definitely get that information. So thank you for doing that. And Chris Sharp, thank you so much for being active and participating in the conversation and adding input. That was awesome. Yeah.
Yes, and Amber put, I think everyone can see Amber's notes there. Thanks, Amber. We love doing what we do, and I love being partnered up with Jamie. She is just a Tasmanian devil and just brings the energy. So come and see us at ICE. We'd love to meet you in person. So here's what will happen. Just a reminder, any ICE members who attended the call, you will be receiving an email with your PDH from ICE. And I'll give just a little bit of a shout out here. We do have the ICE conference next week. So I would say by the end of next week is when you're going to get one email from ICE with your PDH, and you will get another email with your access to Who Knew It. and the resources that were provided on this call. You will be getting an email with those resources. And also reach out to me directly. I would be happy to talk with any of you. Any non-ICE members that happen to be on the call, I can't readily see if anyone on the call is a non-ICE member, but Amber Hefner's information is on the is on the slideshow here, and Amber would be happy to talk to you about any ICE information as well. Reach out to any of us.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody.